Now are we ready to go, right?
Yeah.
Ready to go. Okay. Thank you. We resume our session. We'll now call Mr. Jaco Oosthuizen, who is the CEO of RSA. Mr. Bowles, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thank you very much for coming through. For the record, can you please just state your full name and your designation?
Martinus Jacobus Oosthuizen, CEO of the RSA Group, or Interaction Market Services Holdings, Pty Ltd.
Great, thank you. There should be an oath or affirmation there. I don't have any objection in taking
No
oath.
objections.
Will you please just...
I swear that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Oosthuizen. So just in terms of housekeeping, we've divided the session up, as you know, into two. So you'll have a 30-minute opportunity now just to run through whatever it is you want to do. Tell us a bit more about RSA Group and maybe your views on the inquiry as well. And then that'll be followed by just some questions from the technical team as well.
Right, thank you.
Right,
Just on a lighter note, I think before we start, I think this was a test, because I've been battling my whole career to get market agents to a meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning after they started at 4. Here we are, 2:15. So you're doing something right. Yes, I've prepared a presentation which I do think we will be able to show, but to start with just a small video by introduction to show the panel a little bit of what we do. Thank you very much. As I've already said, good afternoon. My name is Jaco Oosthuizen. I've just slipped down the chair. Thank you for inviting me to share our perspectives on the South African fresh produce value chain. This is in addition to the written submissions and hopefully provide additional insight and assist the Commission in its inquiry. Unpacking the themes from the Commission and shedding light on crucial aspects are required to create an understanding of how it works, and perhaps inform where the statement of issues are incorrectly defined, creating misconceptions and fixed ideas, gaining a comprehensive understanding of the underlying themes, the efficiency of national fresh produce markets, its dynamics, where it fits in the value chain, participation, and barriers to entry, and why this system is often overlooked. Yet when understanding is required, it's the first port of call. To that extent, sessions like this is overdue. First and foremost, we need to acknowledge the importance of the South African fresh produce value chain. Despite its significance to our nation's agriculture and food supply, it often doesn't receive the recognition it deserves. Focus of my discussion relates to the first and third broad theme of the inquiry: national fresh produce markets and the concern that it's inefficient and uncompetitive, competition dynamics that are prevalent and influence of direct contracting, and then discussing barriers to entry, expansion, and participation. As I work my way through the opening, I am focusing on our areas of business and expertise in the fresh produce value chain. Our humble opinion and opening statement are as follows. The Fresh Produce Commission market ecosystem is a low-cost, efficient, transparent, and highly competitive trading platform with low barriers to entry. The agency model is central to the competitive nature of the ecosystem and operates in a stringent regulatory environment with various levels of oversight. Importance of price discovery and integrity of reference price signals to producers, buyers, and the rest of the value chain. Active collaboration between government, specifically local government, is essential. Strong partnerships can lead to better regulations, improved infrastructure, and overall support for the fresh produce value chain. Ensuring that our local council and market management actively participates in continuous investment and upgrading of facilities. Institutionalizing professional, competent management. Free or open market systems are not unregulated. In fact, enforcement of regulations is key to ensure a commission market functions effectively and that the playing field is level. Strengthening the commission system model by investing in the technology is also important, and that's just to name a few. Enhancing the fresh produce value chain resilience. In today's ever-changing world, supply chain resilience is more critical than ever. Factors like weather, poor road, rail, and harbour infrastructure, electricity supply failures, and dysfunctional municipalities can pose substantial challenges. We must explore strategies to make the supply chain more robust, ensuring it can withstand unforeseen disruptions. In spite of the contrary of the above challenges, the South African fresh produce value chain proved to be resilient, accessible, and competitive, locally, regionally, and internationally. We question whether we are drifting towards homeland economics and a state of protection. We see how this is applied in neighboring countries, where they have this protectionist narrative, blocking access to certain produce and commodities to their market, protect local production against competition, yet are allowed to export to South Africa. And South African product are banned and not allowed into the countries. The effect? Empty shelves or very expensive produce for consumers. It's anti-competitive and non-transparent. How might we be avoiding the above? We've seen that the mechanism of open markets and replicating the model in previously underserved areas encourage growth, innovation, and economic stability and sustainability. I would like to walk through some detailed observations. Southern Africa's reliance on South Africa's National Fresh Produce Commission markets. Southern African traders rely heavily on the South African fresh produce market system. Its dependence is due to its efficiency, its well-established infrastructure, the basket of fresh produce that is there, and the accessibility. It serves as a regional hub that benefits not only South Africa, but the entire surrounding region as far as the DRC. You might ask, why do these participants travel to South Africa? Participants from various countries travel to South agencies, where the market authority ensures fair practice, quality control, and proper regulations within the market, aiming to create a transparent and efficient marketplace, where prices are discovered for both sellers and buyers, and this do not exist in those countries. Hence, they travel to South Africa to conduct their business. In South Africa, and I think we've touched on it today during the other inquiries, farming and retail are well understood aspects of the South African economy. However, there's a critical mechanism within the fresh produce sector that often goes unnoticed. That is the national fresh produce markets, the commission system, and the central role the agency model performs within that ecosystem. At the highest level, national fresh produce markets as a neutral playing field, enabling large volumes of produce from producers, attracting thousands of buyers, all facilitated by the agency model, that contributes to high levels of competition, transparency, brand recognition, and value transfer made possible by efficient price discovery mechanism, closely monitored under the watchful eye of various regulatory oversight structures. There are three critical points of understanding needed. We need to recognize the national fresh produce market ecosystem as key to the success of the fresh produce value chain, especially given the needs of South Africa's so-called dual economy, the value and importance of the agency model that operates in a highly regulated space, better understanding of how daily prices of fresh produce are discovered based on supply and demand, forces at each market, and the influence of these reference prices on decision-making for the rest of the value chain. I think it's true to say that there are many misconceptions about pricing variations between markets. And we need to discern whether investigating pricing variations indicate market inefficiencies or whether they reflect a natural reflection of current supply and demand conditions. Price variations are natural in the fresh produce commission markets and are influenced by factors like seasonality, weather conditions, global supply chain influences, input cost, continuity, etc. All of this underpinned by supply and demand. The free market naturally assesses market conditions. Each market is a microcosm of the total supply and demand at a specific point in time, at a specific place, aggregates all of the information naturally. It reveals a state and is the skill of the agency sales team that then starts to find those price levels that will enable them to clear the floor. Mark Twain has a saying, "You ain't getting into trouble for the things that you do not know. You get into trouble for the things that you know for sure that just ain't so." I really want to invite key stakeholders to get the right intelligence from the data and understand it clearly, recognizing the transparency and integrity of the system that's available every day of the year. We don't have to go and wait until we have to look 3 years ago. That information is available on a daily basis. Equally, it's vital to address the misconceptions about the agency model. To clarify this, market agencies, their sales, operation, and administrative teams operating at fresh produce markets play a pivotal role in delivering a range of services to stakeholders and compete fiercely with each other on those various levels. From the RSA Group's perspectives, others might differ. Our role is often misunderstood as being a middleman. I think we've heard it today. We never take ownership of product. We deliver a professional sales service to the marketers of fresh produce, and for that, we charge a commission. It is useful to understand that commission rates are negotiable within the competitive landscape of competing agencies. Part of the negotiation in terms of the level where commission sits is answered in the economic reality of cost structures. There is a lack of appreciation what it costs to employ a world-class sales team. Costs are exacerbated by the inefficient municipalities and infrastructure demise and passing costs back to the agency's cost structures. That causes the agency to absorb the cost to the grower in not increasing the cost of commissions to match the deficient market behavior. Agencies and their staff are regulated by Act 12 and the rules of 2005 and market bylaws and various oversight structures. Let me add a few final points to my presentation in terms of barriers to entry, expansion and participation. And for me, the key question is how can industry and government work together to enhance what we already have? Strengthening it by investing in our unique system that feeds the country at zero cost to the state can significantly improve the value producers, buyers, and consumers of all levels receive for their produce sales or purchases, while fostering growth and development opportunities for emerging and historically disadvantaged fresh produce businesses. Let me start by affirming the crucial role that small and medium-sized enterprises and historically disadvantaged producers play in South Africa's fresh produce value chain and food security. It is generally accepted that more than 50% of volumes traded in the market is in this segment. We recognize the role of new markets opening up in previously underserved areas and getting it right, stimulating emerging producer and SME activity. The national fresh produce market is a platform that stimulates competition, activity, and dilutes concentration. What needs attention are the barriers to entry and expansion affecting SMEs and HTP like access to finance, general capitalization, input material and costs, extension services with a functional agricultural research council, and essential infrastructure like road, electricity, water supply, and transportation. Market access for small farmers. There are several challenges posed by varying packaging, branding, food safety requirements for emerging and small-scale farmers. Furthermore, the lengthy time frames involved in developing a sustainable agribusiness and the substantial financing operation pressure can be stifling. Let's not underestimate then the impact national fresh produce markets as being the ideal launching pad for emerging producers building their businesses and brand, as they have access to thousands of buyers and to agencies and sales teams who understand their environment and who are focusing on smaller producers. In closing, let's remember that the South African fresh produce value chain is a national asset. We believe so. We possess the skills, experience, and commitment to grow and develop the industry for the benefit of all. However, we must ensure that we take the right steps. Collaboration between industry and government is essential to enhance what we already have and secure a prosperous future for all stakeholders in the fresh produce sector. Together, we can strengthen our system, improve competitiveness, add value, and create opportunities for future growth and development. Our collective efforts are needed to build a sustainable future for the South African fresh produce market system. Collaboration, transparency, and the embrace of open markets are essential ingredients in achieving this goal. Let's celebrate competition and ensure that everyone involved can reap the benefits. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Osazen. All right, so Yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of points that we're probably going to be discussing now.
I hope so.
Which is great. I think it sort of introduces us to those. But maybe if you can just start with market agents and the position that they play. So obviously they service, customers on both sides. You've got the producers on the one side, buyers on the other, and essentially you're trying to keep two people happy, or two parties happy. Maybe just explain the dynamics around that and how RSA approaches it, and maybe how it does things differently.
For us, it's very simple. Producers are our principals. We have a fiduciary duty towards them. And one thing that RSA understood very well is that the buyers are not our customers. They are the farmers' customers. And our job is to deliver a professional sales service to the farmer's customer. And with that brings those levels of individual services where agencies compete against each other, but that's in the main our function. We offer that professional sales service to all marketers of fresh produce. That's the position that we are in, but we recognize the producer as our principal, and that the buyers that frequent the market or come to market are their customer. And we've got to service them as well as if the producer was sitting on our shoulder.
All right. And in the relationships that you have, and we've heard a lot this morning already about the relationships and entrenched relationships, specifically with farmers. I mean, what does RSA do to nurture those relationships, to foster the levels of trust that is required at this?
The first instance, I think, is to recognize that no relationship is unconditional. It's conditional on your performance and your service. And if one recognizes that, then within a market agency and the structure of a market agency, it's important to understand, and we compare it akin to a three-legged pot or a pyramid, where the producer sits on top, and you have the agency that houses the sales teams that have got daily communication with the producer, and this relationship needs to be in balance at all times. Should one fall over, it becomes one-dimensional, and you then battle with understanding how this fits together. And that relationship sort of gets replicated through the system. So you would have producer, market authority, agency, producer, market authority, sales teams, and those relationships are in balance or should be in balance all the time.
And those aren't entrenched by agreements that you have with established producers?
No, and again, it reflects a conflict of interest. So no, there's no agreements, no contractual agreements at all within the fresh produce market space.
And no informal exclusivity type arrangements or anything like that? And do you specialize? I mean, we've heard as well that there are certain agencies that specialize in different commodities. Is that something that RSA looks at?
Certainly specialization is certainly an element that would define the success of an agency. But I also think it's important to be present across the basket of fresh produce. So when there's potential shortages of supply and you're not in that space, that you lose out on potential sales, but that you have the basket that you cover in terms of your businesses. And it was part of RSA strategy in an accumulation of family businesses that you cover these different fields of expertise, and you also design your sales team in order to deal with those different commodities and specialities.
Yeah, and in terms of small-scale farmers, I mean, is that something that you've actively gone out and marketed and targeted specifically?
Yeah, and I think we've made quite substantial submissions to the inquiry, where it was a specific strategic intent from RSA, specifically from, I would say, 2000 onwards, where we already recognized this gap where Department of Agriculture extension officers weren't getting to producers, etc. And at that time, I think it was sort of the lead to the electronic transfer of payment era, where a lot of producers still got paid by check. And sometimes, because of wherever the post office is, we couldn't get that money to producers, and we then created a section within the RSA business for small and medium enterprises or farmers. An extension officer was appointed, and we had a bakkie, and it was branded, and we had a GPS. So we logged every single farmer that sent to us. We logged, and we knew from a GPS location where they were, and then also made special effort to get the checks that were sitting with us to those farmers and came back, and we started to build those relationships. Later on, we shifted about 3 or 4, no, a bit longer, 5 years. We shifted our attention to say, but there could be a better way to serve these smaller producers, and that's when we sort of started with the regional market concept, and we shifted our attention into that space.
And what percentage of your business now is small-scale farm or small-scale growers? Could you have?
Look, I think it's dangerous to sometimes just see when it looks like a farmer is small, that they are small, because they have options and they've got various channels, and only a part of their production would find its way to the market. But in terms of the RSA business, I would say anything between 10 and 20% would be from smaller enterprises. And then when you look at the thread of our business, it's a sort of it's probably 80-20% principle that still also apply. So the bulk potentially of smaller sale producers would be between 800 and 1.5 million rands worth of turnovers a year, and that form the bulk of our producer base. So yeah, I'm quite happy that part of the business is growing, and that the expansion of our footprint has given producers access to markets closer to where they produce, and it's changed that dynamic, because now you don't have to travel all the way to the larger metro markets to be able to compete with your brand and to be able to have the same style of service that you would receive at a metro market, you have at a market closer to you. So
are we still seeing, you're talking about the sort of strategy that you have now.
Yes.
Are we starting to see, growers taking or making use of those smaller regional
massive
markets?
uptake. It's unbelievable.
Is it?
I welcome you to come and visit those markets. It is.
And the pricing, I mean, are they getting, because we've also heard as well, and we've seen through the submissions that, we are still seeing people traveling past 3 or 4, regional or smaller markets to get to Joburg or Tshwane.
It will always form part of a producer's marketing strategy to say, okay, there's my markets, who will I serve when? So that will always be there, and you can't service, I think, or hold your marketing strategy up as a good one if you don't serve all of the markets if you can. But you will certainly have a strategy to say, these are my markets that I want to serve, and you will focus on those markets. And we've seen the growth on those smaller regional markets, which operates on exactly the same basis as the metro markets. And over the past 7 years, where it started as a small trial project on one facility, from an RSA group perspective, it's grown to 6, 7 nationally, and the newest one in collaboration with Fresh Link is in Rustenburg, and from, let's say, 1 or 2 original producers and a handful of buyers, we've seen a phenomenal growth in those markets.
So moving on to pricing, so we've obviously heard as well that that's pricing at the FPMs is based largely on supply and demand, but maybe if you could unpack that a little bit more for us, and RSA's approach to pricing, and also maybe touch on availability of data. You did mention it in your presentation. Yeah. Is there things that RSA, or do you have systems as well that you've developed internally that you rely on to better predict pricing? Or
there's no protection of pricing.
Prediction.
The price is there, whether we're there or not. It's natural. The price for a product will be there, and markets is like a microcosm of what the total supply across the country is and also what the total demand is. And because it's concentrated, it develops those price signals through supply and demand. And there's various other factors that that's at play in terms of finding that right price by our sales teams. And elements that play a role in that is continuity of product. The last thing a producer wants to do is disappoint its buyer when tomorrow the buyer is coming to the market to buy the product and it's not there. That buyer will shift and buy product that it needs to be able to serve their customer. So branding is very important. It is, in my opinion, where producer brands compete effectively against each other. And it's the only place where, for the cost of supporting the market, where producer brands have access to 20 or 30 or 40,000, if you take it nationally, hundreds of thousands of buyers every single day that will walk past the brand. The effect of cold storage, where producers invest in cold storage facilities or cold storage, cold chain, influences their ability to outcompete the opposition. The element of marketing strategy, specifically where the producer have options between formal retail, the fresh produce markets, and export. So that will influence potentially the flow of volumes to markets. But the prices that are discovered on a daily basis, in world terms, sophisticated. The rest of the world will look with tears in their eyes if they understand what we still have in South Africa, where reference prices are available on a daily basis and forms part of the historic reference to what prices were yesterday, what's expected to be the volumes tomorrow, is there weather conditions that might affect the supply or movement of product, and all of those things have an influence on the price and the discovery of those prices. But a misconception is that we don't make the price. Those market agents make the price and as if they own it. That's not the truth. The price is there whether we're there or not. It's our skill and our ability to find that price to be able to clear the floor, because tomorrow, more products coming. It's highly perishable, and perishability also have an influence on price discovery.
All right. Just on commissions as well. So what we have observed, and I think it's plain to see, is that there's been very little price competition in terms of the commissions charged by the various agencies. How does the RSA Group calculate its commissions that it charges to its growers?
Well,
is it set nationally, or is there?
So the last thing potentially within a business like ours, is to have a fixed set of commissions. Commissions are negotiable. That's a fact. It's not set by anyone in the country. There's no oversight. It's not driven by any of those elements, and it's driven to large effect of what our cost structures are. So we would not treat producers differently within the business, because within the Act it would be a conflict of interest to treat producers differently at different places of our business. So if producers sends to RSA at different locations, we won't have different commission structures with them, because you would then treat them differently towards anybody else. So,
but to what extent are the agencies competing with each other in terms
internally, or the agencies, the competition?
Yeah, so the competition. So Subtropica, for instance.
Yeah, they would.
I mean, is it quite competitive in the sense that, you've got a producer who comes to you, who's been with you for years, and says, listen, we were approached by, player X. Yeah. They've prepared to come down to 7 or whatever it is.
Yes.
Can you meet it better? Is that happening?
It does happen.
Or is it more non-price factors?
No, it happens. But ultimately, we believe it depends on your service. So you need to justify.
So what is that service?
Well, as a broad term, it's a professional sales service, and it places the farmer firstly in our structure. It allows us to attract top salespeople that deliver that hardcore sales service every day. we merchandise on our floors. We make sure that from a delivery service, that means offloading and unloading to buyers, we compete heavily in terms of creating that space where buyers feel that they are serviced. They don't have to wait for their trucks to be unloaded. We've developed internally business intelligence platform whereby we create total transparency for the producer from the time the product arrives till the time the product was sold. And we regularly create, we call it producer reviews, where we add value to their marketing strategy. And details of that is akin to RSA, and that's the basis that we use to compete with our competitors.
So is there a lot of churn? Is there a lot of switching between large growers and their agents? Because we've heard a lot of evidence to the effect that it's long established relationships, and that is key. And I understand the trust principles behind that. But between the big players, is there a lot of switching, a lot of competition at that level?
They're switching. There's no doubt about it. And it takes years to move. If a producer is solid in the relationship, there's always competition to try and move that producer to your floor. It's non-stop. And no for an answer is not an answer. You would keep on selling your value proposition to that producer, and you will find, and it's part of the strategy from our perspective, why we expanded our footprint, that the producer is very strong with the relationship, say, for instance, in Tshwane, but that there's an opportunity in Ekurhuleni or in eThekwini, and you would then start to be able to move and get a foot in the door with delivering your brand of service. But it's again, relationships are not unconditional. So we all have to remember that, and relationships will shift. And we've had experiences where large producer relationships have shifted.
But would you agree with the suggestion that there is very little price competition on the commissions?
No, there's competition.
Is it?
Because it looks like it's the same, it's not the same. In terms of that, it's not. There's quite a bit of competition in there, and it's
so
an
you
element.
say it looks different. I mean, are you structuring it differently? Is it?
It depends on how your business also is structured. That will determine how that rate could move, depending on your sales force commission structure, depending on your cost structure. So agencies would potentially compete on that basis. So if you could have a lighter structure, you could potentially afford to adjust your commission.
Okay. All right. And then just lastly, just to round it off, I mean, what can be done to increase price competition at the commission level?
Well, I think it will inevitably be natural, and optimization and the optimization of transaction costs will come in play. And where you've got the municipal markets taking 5% of the cost between 10 and 12.5%. That's a big part of why the commission structure is where it is. And when you look internationally, which is also part of the process where we're competing, it's on par with what are internationally the rates that are being competed with. So I think it will come part of the optimization. Additional competition of other channels will certainly have an effect on it. Your online trading platforms that are positioning themselves would be able to compete, but we find that they are mostly competing at the level where the 5% is inefficient, not the agencies commission that deliver this range of service. So you find that that's partly a sort of a block that causes a little bit of inefficiency.
And a decrease in concentration at that market agent level? New entrants?
No, increased competition would solve it. And I think also the channel competition has an influence on that.
Okay. All right, so I think that maybe segues into my next theme, which is concentration at that agent's level. So once again, I think there's 14 agencies trading on the Joburg floor, which isn't a lot if you think about the volume that's going through there and the number of producers that are being serviced. But what are the barriers to entry? I know you did touch on it in your presentation, but what are the barriers to entry for new market agents wishing to enter that market?
Well, barriers to entry from a regulatory perspective, etc., are fairly low. And then entering the market, I think there you would need a good business plan to convince the market authority to open up floor space for you. And I also think you need to come to the market with enough capital to some extent because it's time, yes, it takes time, especially if you are new in the industry. And I think that's where we probably have not seen the growth that we expected to see in terms of new entrants, because it's all sort of entrants from outside the ecosystem. From inside the ecosystem, there's been growth from a sales perspective, people owning businesses, people owning shares, etc. But that has been, and it's again, I think I said it in my presentation, it's a little known sort of industry, and it's in essence sort of you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 365 days a year. You've got to deliver a sales service that you compete against or compete with other agencies against. So in essence, those competitive elements are in itself difficult to be able to start from scratch. So it would be probably a different strategy required for newer entrants if they really understand the ecosystem. But it's possible. Yeah.
So maybe just touching on the capital requirements. I mean, in your experience, is there access to funding? Are banks or financial institutions prepared to fund? Is there not a risk attached in this industry? And is there, availability of funding?
I think part of being an agent or an agency or an agency model, you're working with other people's money. So your reputation, your administrative skill, and those things has to be in place, because R1 million worth of sales, there's R1 million going into your trust account less the market's commission, and that's not your money. And I think that brings together that you've got to be an individual or a business that comes with a reputation in terms of your standing, and then the ability to move around in the field, to visit producers, be at producer days. And we have seen where on markets the entrants have sort of dwindled to some extent, but other channels, there the uptake has been quicker.
So, I mean, you guys all employ like salespeople. I think Dapper referred to them as salespeople, or agents, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, are we seeing a lot of salespeople coming into the market, cutting their teeth, earning their stripes for a period of 5-10 years, and then starting their own agency? Is that something
it's happened? Yes, certainly. It's happened in the past few years. It's something that we try to work very hard on. It's, if you think about the context and the spread, it is quite a bit of male-dominated. 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's a robust, tough environment. We haven't seen. We've worked actively to recruit and to recruit from within, and because we're a business or family business that's been put together, and now we're a business of families, it has sort of helped us where we've got young people coming through the business. We also, from an administrative perspective, we've worked very hard in terms of finding qualified administrative skills, chartered accountants, etc. That's in the administrative part of the business. Has been very successful for us.
And from a transformation perspective, is there?
We're very happy with our transformation perspective.
What percentage of your salespeople are HDIs? Or
if you take the different levels, so senior salespeople that have been in the game longer, there's less, but I would say at least 50 to 60% of our junior salespeople and sales staff and support staff, and if you take is strong in admin, it's probably 70%, if not more.
Okay. Floor space allocation.
Yes.
I know that you guys have been actively involved in that.
Yeah.
I think it was in your submission. And by the way, your submissions are printed out there.
I've
If you
got
want
it,
to
yeah.
yeah. But maybe just talk to us about floor space allocation, I mean, and the formulas that are being applied. I understand it's hotly contested.
Are my views my own? It's an emotive issue. I think we could have done a lot better in terms of the formula. As I think the previous attendees explained, it's basically a function of the market authority to calculate the floor space in terms of your sales, and then adding volumes and divided it by 2. That gives you a percentage, and there would be, say, this is the square meterage available on the sales floor, and this is how we want to design it, and this is the floor space available to you. But what is lost in all of this is the effectiveness of that square meter. Because remember, it's the farmer that pays for it. So when you look at the real estate, it's probably the most expensive real estate in the world. Because if you translate the 5% the producers pay for floor space and the bit of other services that they receive from the market, it could translate to 500 to 600 rand a square meter per month for a shed. And that should place another emphasis in terms of what are we going to do to invest in our facilities to remain competitive. So when you look potentially at a more modern floor space allocation, you would look at the time it takes for you to sell the product, because it's perishable, the throughput through your floor, etc., etc., the value of product that moves through your floor, or if you specialize in hardier product that's unpalletized, etc., how do we improve that process to improve the efficiencies? We can't forever and a day not palletize or incentivize palletization so that you don't have these inefficiencies in the system. And that all should, over time, be taken into account to modernize the floor space allocations, because I think it's old. But we're working hard to influence the way we look at floor space, the way we look at the formula. I think there's certainly room for improvement.
Would you consider floor space allocation a hindrance to new entry?
Not a hindrance, because from a new entry perspective, you are allocated minimum space, and that periods are long. The market authority give you long enough period to build your volume through your floor, and always the context of that is where the new entrants are positioned. So 100% of the time they are positioned in the more favorable parts of the market floor, where there's more activity, close to the cashiers, etc., and where there's a volume of buyers. So they potentially have a first bite, excuse the pun, at the apple, in terms of buyer presence. So they are.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that's sort of your introduction.
Yes.
So you into the market, you get allocated that space
Yeah.
for a period of time.
Yes.
How long is that?
2-3 years sometimes. There's no real.
And with the formulas that are being applied,
Yeah.
I mean, once you get past that, let's say you do get past that,
Yeah.
you know, do the calculate, do the
Every 6 months.
every 6 months,
Yeah.
but I mean, the way they calculate it based on volume and all
Yeah.
of that, isn't it sort of, you sort of pigeonholed as a new entrant,
Yeah.
you stay there, it's very, very difficult to increase your floor space because of the
Yeah.
formulas that are applied.
So let me maybe give a little bit more context. One of the elements that we specifically in a Joburg market, that's a 3-hall system, where one hauls vegetables and tomatoes, one hauls fruit, one hauls potatoes and onions. For new entrants to start a business and you've got to run 3 halls makes it very difficult. The proposal have been to the market that for new entrants allow, because the new entrants are entrepreneurial, they're normally owner business, small owner business, let them have the advantage of selling all produce on the same floor, from potatoes, fruit, to vegetables, to the rest. In that instance, you create immediate um, uh, 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 economy of scale in a small sense, because you're across the range, you're across the basket, and you will most probably attract buyers across the range. And you could see, if you look at wholesale trade just outside of the market, inside the market, it's one of their advantages, all the products on the same floor. So when you look at a perspective where floor space isn't an issue because it's either too small, you could say that you should combine your floor space so that you have the seasonality spread and increase, that you can handle it within a limited floor space. And then if floor space becomes available, it's not a fight because it's your season. You're in your season or you're out of your season. And I think that would alleviate a lot of challenges within the floor space formula.
So you did mention that throughput and turnaround time ought to be considered as part of that formulation. Can you maybe elaborate on that and how that would change things?
Well, for instance, if you could look at racking, for instance, so you would rather go a little bit vertical than horizontal when it gets to floor space, if there's an issue in terms of floor space. In terms of throughput, in terms of the value that's generated on the floor, if you have high value items, you might not need such a large floor space, but in terms of the floor space calculation, you have additional floor space. It will allow you to go out and attract product that's more horizontal, that needs a little bit more space. But it should be looked at least. I'm not saying that is the ultimate solution, but we can't be as stoic just to have one set of formula and you think it's going to work forever and a day. You've got to be a little bit more dynamic when you start to look at floor space allocations and the formula.
So in your view, what can be done to eliminate or lessen the barriers for new market agents?
That's a good question. I don't think we have the answer to that extent. I do think collaboration is an option, and we have worked quite closely with some startup projects, but I think the element of the long game has been not there. And if the element of the long game's there, and you have the floor space, and you are, in my opinion, linked to some of the larger agencies, I think you will find that those barriers to entry will not be less, but they'll be manageable. I think there's elements of that can be utilized.
Transformation is a big issue. So what are your thoughts on the following statement, which was made by the Council for Black Market Agents, where they said that black market agents are struggling to break racial patterns in the industry, where white commercial farmers at least, are continuing their long historical relationships with established white agents, and are unwilling to supply black farmers.
Black market agents?
Yes, well, so supply black market agents with produce,
Yeah, untrue. So in terms of the context of that is that, again, those relationships are not unconditional, as I've said it. Your value proposition is strong enough, you'll be able to convince producers to send to you. There's product coming to that market, I think the chair said it's 365 days a year. There's really no excuse. It's about your own personal integrity and your own personal track record, or your business integrity and your business track record. That goes a long way in moving relationships in terms of your service that you deliver. So I find that to be a little bit narrow in their thinking. And in the context of the NAMC Section 7 investigation, the targets that were set, it's also a way of looking at it. Every year, market agents report to the Agricultural Produce Agents Council in terms of their transformation objectives. We all have employment equity plans in place, and we actively work in strengthening that part of the business, and a lot of agencies are doing it. But we have to remind ourselves that of the 14 agents, probably the bulk of them are SMEs, small family business or small business. That's who they are. But when you look at the larger businesses that have gained traction in terms of expanding their business, expanding their footprint, most of them are transformed. We're happy. We were a level 4 last year. We're a level 5 this year. We're 56% owned by African Rainbow Capital, and when you take those context into account, then 70% of fresh produce on markets on the larger moves through transformed agencies, and all of them are actively involved in changing that perspective. And it's reported to Agricultural Produce Agents Council, and it forms part of the report that goes to the minister.
Thank you. So moving on now to growers,
Yes.
the growing side. So we've obviously, it's been a big focus of the inquiry is the challenges faced by small-scale growers. We've just gone through a series of workshops now. But from your viewpoint, what are the challenges that you've encountered when dealing with small-scale growers?
I think there's potential historical content to it, from access to land, etc., and then the way that the smaller farmers have developed in terms of what they plant, when they plant, etc. And normally it is in a vegetable environment. It is difficult as it is to grow. It's not simple. It's risky. You deal with nature, but once the producers are up and running, I do think markets are there, yes, but it's getting your product to market. And it's not that the quality is world class. It's up to standard. It's getting your product to market efficiently. And then a lot of the times, smaller producers have to pool resources in terms of getting product to market, getting it onto transport, and then having to be able to get their pricing, get the money back into their bank accounts, and build their financial resources. I think the other elements of it is known in terms of access to finance, the lack of extension officers from the Department of Agriculture in terms of those spaces. But I think those are the elements. And in the past 3 or 4 years, if you think the impact load shedding, etc., have on commercial growers, what the impact would be on smaller growers. Also the element of where sometimes there's just free movement of people across land, criminality, and if you take and there's theft of a smaller farmer's water pump, it is just sort of the end of the world. Whereby with medium to larger growers, there's a chance that you could either safeguard it or you could replace it. But from that perspective, I think the Afrikaans word is betredingsrecht. I don't know what the English. We seriously got to look at where those farmers, smaller farmers, and their properties are protected, and that where they have the best opportunity to be able to get good quality product to market. And then the element for us is our regional market concept, where we're closer to markets, and we find that gives them at least for 20 or 30 or 40% of their crop, they've got markets close to them which they can compete with other growers. And for us, that's been sort of the biggest success story of giving smaller producers an opportunity to cut their teeth on a market that's not a metro market.
So just in terms of that access to market, do you think there's a role to be played by the market agents in facilitating that, in providing some sort of training and support? And because ultimately you're potentially nurturing future or future potential customers.
We played a role in that, but I think there's so many other institutions that are far better equipped to do that. Yes, we visit. We have farmer days. We go into the field, but that's limited in terms of where we're a professional sales force. So we don't know a lot about farming. But we don't farm. We don't have that skill set. And I do think there is enough resources within either Department of Land Reform and Agriculture that should do that, the Agricultural Research Council, and I also know that the Agricultural Produce Agents Council spend time with emerging growers in in market dynamics. That's where we play a role, because we would love to sell the product, and we do. We would love to get it to market. So we've got to play that role in that space. But I do believe there's enough resources. I think market management, or market authorities can do a lot more. And you know, I think it's part of our motivation, if we have an opportunity to engage, that yes, we can do more from a market authority perspective.
I know you dealt with it extensively in your submissions,
Yes.
but maybe in a public forum, you know, does RSA Group have any developmental programs which are geared towards assisting small-scale farmers, and maybe elaborate on
Yes,
that?
we had. We from, as I said, from 2000, basically, we had certain projects. We had projects with the Dutch new cooperative where we in Wanedi. We had the Eco project, which was a target to bring 300 female producers to market, exposing them to market. We've ran those projects for years, and we received funding for them. We had to report on them. We engaged on them, and I believe out of those learnings, we then said, but you know, if that's the case, and what we see, there is the ability to grow. The small farmers are entrepreneurial. They produce fantastic product. Can we move? Can we replicate the market model? And I think that's been the biggest success of shifting our attention to that, to providing what we know best, and that's a professional sales service at markets.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to another area of your business, which is the Federated Farmers business.
Yes.
Can you maybe just elaborate and describe what that business is?
Federated Farmers is an agency business that operates in the retail space, and it operates exactly on the same way as a fresh produce market agent would operate. It never takes ownership of the product. It's registered with the Agricultural Produce Agents Council. It operates a trust account, but it delivers a professional sales service in the retail channel, which have different dynamics than the fresh produce market channel. And that's what Federated Farmers' main function is.
Okay. Can you maybe explain the sort of different pricing dynamics at play between produce sold on the market floor versus products sold directly to retailers?
Certainly the price signal influences the direct buying sphere, and in that space it's more formal. It is, how can I say it? I'm looking for a word. If I don't find it, I'll find it later out of context, maybe. It's more future driven. So because of the lead times in terms of retail, that you need to get the product from farm, packed in retailers' packaging, the crating, the supply chain, you need to negotiate pricing in advance based on what's happening on the market, and that is then the prices that we would say list prices, and that would be competitive within that space, and the producer then, the ownership then moves at the point of delivery to the DCs. Yeah.
Okay.
But it is dynamic. Let me put it. It's always based in its own essence on supply and demand, and it has its end retail competition on shelf between the different retailers.
And do you use the price discovery at the NFPMs as a
base?
As a base.
Yeah, it'll always be. I think it's relevant, and you've got to start somewhere. But it's fierce negotiations. From a chain store's perspective, their buyers are astute. They understand their market, and they're good operators.
There's been a lot of discussion around sort of the spread between the markets, the market price, and what you see on the shelves at the retailers. Can the ruling price at the NFPMs be used as a proxy for an ex-distribution center price that you would see at a retailer?
No, I think that's I know the example was used this morning about the farmer seeing his product in a retailer for X price, and then, the price was that on the market, and but I think the element that we need to understand in the retail space, fiercely competitive, and the product's perishable. So the risk, and this is where I think we need, if the producer wants to assume the risk through the full channel and get a retail type price, he's got to take risk till that point, and it's not feasible. And the producer needs within his marketing strategy say, how do I design my marketing strategy to be able to be certain what my alternatives are, where my price is discovered, and for it to be as strong as possible, have the same quality and type of packaging that goes to retail also on the sales floor, so that reference price is there, and from there on determine how am I going to deal, and through what system I'm going to deal with the chain store. Am I going to negotiate direct? Am I going to list my brand, and then develop that sales strategy for him, and then obviously export slightly different should that farmer be exporting. But the choice lies with the grower, and the growers are fully informed in terms of that pricing structures and levels that exist.
So you obviously, you guys wear two different hats.
Yes.
Or see two different pictures.
Yes.
What is the price negotiation like at that producer retailer level? How does that negotiation take place?
So in RSA's instance, the producers that we service in that space have appointed us as their agent to do that negotiation. So that's the one part.
No, sure.
Where the producer have chosen to do that directly, this chair's got a mind of its own, do that directly, that's what they expose to. They negotiate directly with the buyers, and it's a process that's not simple. It's you have to first of all be able to negotiate a listing for your product at the chain store. That listing will be in your name or in the producer's name, and you would want to have, and if for the lack of a better word, a program, so that these would be when you deliver to the grower, and I think the premise is that retailers would like to deal with producers that have the ability of 12 months of the year supply, but that's not possible. So they build relationships with various other producers that fit that category of consistency of supply, of quality, being able to add the value, pack in their packaging, etc., etc. Sometimes that space is filled by intermediaries, where they would act between the producer, add the value, and they would most probably also own the listing. If I could say own the listing, have the listing, whereby they would fill part of the gap and procure product for programs, add the value, and then negotiate price with the retailer. I don't know if I've explained all the elements of it, but that's sort of,
so, yeah.
I think it's
Any
more in
follow-ups?
detail in my submission if we need to have a look.
Perfect. Just moving on to price discovery at the markets themselves. So there's going to be a list of questions here that will follow sort of a similar theme now.
Okay.
But just referring to a situation where the market agency is able to purchase from itself and then on-sell that produce later at a higher price. I mean, is that something that realistically can happen, and does it happen, where that sort of manipulation of pricing, if there is?
The context of that is internally, obviously the first price would be wrong, but it doesn't happen. You're not allowed to buy from yourself, number one. The levels of oversight within the market system is also there. So let's take the instance from salespeople, etc., that when you log into the system, you've got to have a salesperson's card. Those cards are limited. Every single transaction is transparent to the market. So no, there's no element of buying from yourself and on-selling, because that's a conflict of interest, and it's not done. I think where the misconception does come from is where there are credits supplied in terms of on behalf of the farm or of the buyer, whereby that mechanism that is controlled by the Agricultural Produce Agents Council credit policy, that should be followed. But
What is
no,
that
that
policy?
doesn't happen.
What is that policy?
Well, the policy is you can't buy you can't buy product from yourself or from the producer and on sell it.
Okay.
You can only supply credit on behalf of the buyer, and then your farmer needs to be informed that you have supplied credit to that buyer for this product, and it appears in terms of the report back to growers.
Okay.
It appears on the account, sir.
All right. Reserve stock buying. Can you maybe explain how that works? And
Yeah, it would be for buyers outside of town, most probably. Sometimes I think it's also an over-traded term to that extent in terms of market authorities. But reservations is part of either managing your stock on the floor when buyers come and they say, I'm in this hall, I'm coming to potatoes, please just keep for me, I'm coming to book. Because if you're not there and you don't book, product's gone. So yeah, reservations is a function of managing your stock, and sometimes when buyers are not frequenting the market, they would phone in the morning or they say, can you keep me with the proviso you got to book, because there's buyers that want the stock.
And is it locked in at a price?
Yeah, it's locked in at a price on the market system.
Okay.
Some market systems potentially are a bit porous, where it is not as strong as some other markets, or the management of that is not as strong, but it's not an element that is being misused.
Okay.
In my
And it
opinion.
doesn't affect the price discovery process either.
No, you've got to lock in at today's price,
Yeah.
and that's it. And then if anything happens and the buyer doesn't have money on its card, then it gets cancelled, and then it comes back on the system, and the farmer says, my product's not sold. You've got to explain.
Okay. And I suppose the same goes for late sales or sales taking place outside of the trading hours.
Yeah, look,
Is it
I
something
think
that happens often?
yeah,
or-
not often. In the past it used to. I think depending on the strength of the trading system, but late sales again has to happen in conjunction with market management, and it can happen, for instance, when power goes off, the trading system off. How do you sell? In those instances, you would call it a late sale because you use the same system of recording it, and then as the system comes on, you digitize it from that perspective. It happens from time to time with larger buyers that are residence wholesalers on the market that at 11 or 12 o'clock, suddenly they run short of product, and then they have to negotiate with the market to allow a late sale, prices of the day, and then it needs to be booked the next morning when the trading system opens.
Thank you. Just on wholesalers, I mean, what is your view on wholesalers operating at the NFPMs?
They play an important role. In terms of the ecosystem, they are not part of the price discovery floor. They are part of the demand structure. Mm-hmm. And if market authorities apply their own bylaws, they would not allow product to bypass the sales stores and go directly to wholesalers, because that will influence the ecosystem, and that will influence potentially the integrity of price discovery. I think it is a problem over time, where the mechanism of how wholesalers get product in that directly, but it's something that we've got to deal with from a market management perspective. And if it sort of gets out of control, I think you'll find that producers will stop using that market, because the integrity of price discovery is just not there. But it is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it is being addressed by by the market authority and engagements with the agencies, because it is a problem.
Thank you. All right. The last theme I want to discuss relates to structural linkages, and it will require us to speak about RSA shareholding and anything like that. I know that your attorney has indicated that there might be some sensitive information.
Yes.
Can I maybe be guided by you? I'll ask the questions and...
Yeah, you can.
All right. So can you maybe name all the entities that RSA has a direct shareholding in, as well as any instances of cross-shareholding with the RSA group and other market participants?
Competitive market agency cross-shareholding, that doesn't exist. We don't have any other cross-shareholding in any other competitive market agency business. No.
And within the fresh produce market itself, any vertical?
No. The only element from a strategic perspective, strategic investment perspective, the holding company has shareholding together with other entities in the Cape Town market investment company that operates on that market. But that's a strategic investment, and it's from an holding company perspective. So it's not within the trading environment at all.
Does RSA Group have any linkages to
farms? No, we don't.
To farms? No.
There's no producer shareholding at all, and never has been within the RSA Group.
What is the relationship with FreshLink?
FreshLink is the software system that we designed and developed in lieu with our regional market strategy. And FreshLink acts on two legs: one, as the market authority, and two, as the developer of the software. And yes, the holding company has invested startup capital in FreshLink. But that's what it is. And there are other producers involved, staff involved, and it's a wide shareholder base within FreshLink. Yeah.
All right. And there's no link to ZZ?
As well as our holding company has a share in FreshLink, yes.
And Africa Rainbow Capital,
yes,
you did mention that they are a majority shareholder in the RSA Group. When you talk about the holding company, we're talking about they also seem to have an interest in Subtropico.
Yes.
Does that have any sort of competitive dynamics? Does that affect any competitive dynamics?
And they handle it very professionally and totally independent from each other. Okay. There's no cross-seating in boards. There's no cross-contamination. It's an investment portfolio for ARC, and they handle it as such.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think that's that. Just as okay, that's all been answered. Chair, I'm done from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Mr. Mara, do you have any? Okay, he's got some questions for you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Mr. Oosthuizen, just two questions from my side. I think the first is, and I think you've touched on this sort of on the edges, but perhaps let's deal with this directly, is this issue of, and I've asked the same question to another stakeholder earlier today, because you operate both as an agency and as a market operator, as a market authority, essentially. The role that wholesalers play, especially wholesalers that do not sell through the trade floor, what are your views on whether or not that creates distortions, whether on price, whether on availability, any types of distortions?
I think we've got to define where those wholesalers sit. So if the wholesaler sits off market, in other words, not on the market premises, there's no issue. They can buy anywhere. They've got choice, and they're free to do whatever they want. So from that perspective, there is no issue. If it's resident wholesalers that are seated on market premises, and if you look at the history where that came from, it was from the development of the market when the market was built in 64, completed in 74 on Joburg Market. There was this element of say, but we want to make sure that we've got demand structures in place, and that's where the term resident wholesalers came from, and they were afforded to have premises on the market, and they fell within the ambit of the bylaws, where the process was you buy on the sales on the commission floor, and you on-sell your product, and that process was regulated by the market authority and the market bylaws. And there was also a rule, or the market bylaws stipulates that should product not be available on the floor that the wholesaler requires, he had to submit an application to the then market master to say, this product's not available, I have a producer that can send it to me, can I apply that the product enters the market? Then the market authority would take control of the product, it would be booked through the trading system, visible pricing, and the wholesaler would then become the owner of that product, not the producer. Because now, as soon as it enters the market, it's the wholesaler's product. So the wholesaler's name would appear as if he's a producer, and the product would be booked and through the trading system. And then there was levels of transparency, and the market authority would earn its ad valorem commission, and then there would be a reduced commission because nobody did anything else of using the sales system or an agency for that matter. So that would be the process. But if unbridled entrance of product coming into the market, not moving through the sales system, not visible, it will have a distortion of the floor price. That's a fact. So that element we have to be able to put on the table. So if there's large quantities of product coming into the market, where markets have potentially porous gates, if I could put it to you that way, it's not visible, it will have an influence on the integrity of the price discovery for the market.
Do you know of any markets where that actually happens?
Yes.
Which are?
Joburg, Tshwane, Cape Town, it moves through the trading system. It's transparent. The smaller markets, it's more difficult to understand because of visibility issues. But in the main, I would say yes. Those two markets, we know it's a well-known fact. It's not.
I see, and just also to clarify, I mean, it's slightly different. If I understand you correctly, it's slightly different from a situation where there is a wholesaler directly next to an NFPM, but they don't use the trading floors. You're not referring to that situation.
No,
that is, you're saying, is something completely.
That's fair trade, and it's competition, and that's a channel that business decided to utilize. There's no issue with that. The context, and there's no issue with it being where the wholesaler is a resident wholesaler on the market premises, buying through the commission floor. That's part of the arrangement with market authority. That's the reason why you have the ecosystem work for you. Security is taken care of, the infrastructure is there, you're close to the floors, you have a sense of a sort of advantage over other wholesalers that are further distances away from the market that competes with resident wholesalers. So that was why it was designed in that way, to stimulate demand on sales floors and why you were on market premises. So there's a distinct advantage of being inside the market premises in terms of that space. Sure.
Thank you. That really does provide my clarity. The second question I'm interested in is again this sort of very unique perspective that RSA has, again being both a sort of agent at the fresh produce markets, but then also in their federated farming units, having the insight of dealing directly and negotiating prices directly with retailers. So in that sense, I mean, does RSA ever use the NFM NFMP prices, the fresh produce market facility prices, as some sort of benchmark or price discovery method when negotiating the price with retailers?
Yeah. Everybody uses aggregated prices from the national fresh produce markets, and it's a good base. And specifically when producers have a solid marketing strategy where the same quality, variety, class of product moves to the fresh produce market, makes them far more secure in terms of how to negotiate, and puts our team or the agent in a strong position to say, this is where we're moving from. And it also secures the retailer, because it's now the transparency of the reference price is important to everybody in the industry, and that brings a sense of integrity to the playing field.
And you would say that is part of the strategic importance of an NFPM, that price discovery model that goes beyond just the borders of the market.
Yeah. If you would, for a lack of maybe to philosophize a little bit, if you think what it would cost the UK Potato Commission to find out the price of potatoes versus where today it's instantaneously available within the current transaction cost, it's incredible.
Thank you, Chair.
So thank you, Mr. Mare, for that. Maybe just a few follow-ups. Yeah, but I think just based on your submission, I just want to confirm this because you have kindly provided, I think it's question 18, the market size and the channels. I think it's the share of each channel. And what then is your estimate of the overall market size based on these numbers, these percentages rather?
Yeah,
I just want to get a
I think if I'm correct, and I'll try and remember them.
It's page 444.
Yeah, you would have the national, and it might have moved a little bit, but I think it will be within the ambit of the submissions, that the fresh produce, national fresh produce market size, I've got it here, I said it's around 35%. I think I would have been spot on.
Yeah,
Retail, supermarkets around 20, but then you've got to look at that, and then exports around 45.
Yeah, I'm just looking now at the base number you used.
Yeah. Yeah.
The base. So what is your estimate of the total size? I just
From a rand turnover perspective.
Yes. Just so that we,
okay,
if you are able to, because
so,
I think just so that we can
if you look
understand
at
your
national
numbers,
fresh produce markets, I would say around 20 to 21 billion in farmer sales. You would have, I would say, around on retail supermarkets between 12 and 15, because that's a little bit different, difficult to get, but it's there. And then exports, I would say anything towards 80 towards 90 billion in terms of exports, depending on product and process. But that would be I don't think we'll be far off the mark. So let's say if you add it together, you're looking at about 120 billion farmer sales in round figures that are generated. That excludes hospitality trade or direct contract with Simba, etc. That excludes that portion of the value chain.
All right. Okay, thanks for that. I just want to make sure that at least if you are able to, I think maybe Mark, you can send us just how you arrived at the.
We can
so that we don't use so we can also cross-check these numbers. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of fact. Yeah. Yes, thank you. And on because I ask you this because you do interface with retailers,
yes,
as well as farmers, right?
Yeah.
So, but both. I suppose
Yes.
it's both. And what's the bargaining position? So how have you? I see the reference price is the market price, the national fresh produce market prices. But how have you? I don't want specific numbers. Maybe you can just indicate where do you land with retailers relative to the prevailing market prices, and of course with
Okay.
the farmers, I
Yeah.
suppose it's that
It-
it's that price.
Yeah, I think it's competitive. It reflects market pricing in terms of list pricing that retailers, that would be the comparative price, would be the list price of that, not the retail price. That's a different competitive space.
yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of list pricing and market reference pricing, it's competitive. The difference potentially is that you have product in smaller packaging. You have a different supply chain that services that industry, and those costings all form part ultimately of the list price component, but it's comparable to market prices.
All right. So
So
it would be-
obviously the cost structures differ here. There's a certain cost structure on fresh produce markets, but the pricing component will always be relative to the reference price. Yeah.
So when you look at that, I just ask you if you have made the observation. So when you look at those prices, the input prices to retailers, and what you observe, I don't know whether you track
On the
the
retail level.
retail, yeah, just for your business. I don't know whether if you track retail,
Yeah.
what do you make of those prices in terms of just the spread? Do you is it
In my opinion, I think I'm going to be not tripping over my words. It's a very competitive space at retail level. The ownership of the product has moved towards the retailer. So they are responsible for all the movement of transport, electricity cost, getting it from DC into store across the country, and then being competitive in that store to other retailers competing with them, as well as independent retailers that have a different supply chain that competes for the consumer's wallet. So in my opinion, it's a highly competitive environment, and the prices at that level will obviously reflect their cost structures. And again, it is for all to see what the different pricing is and how hard retailers compete with each other to be able to get a larger share of the consumer wallet. And we are privileged to have them as operators within the system. They know what they're doing, and they're very competitive. And also in terms of the space where they're competing for the supply side of the producer, and we compete for the supply side of it's competitive.
so does it in any way, so because you price day to day, does it the prices at retail, what you observe of the product that you are not supplying, do they in any way influence, say, prices at the market?
No.
So when you observe, observe
that's
that
from, yeah.
2 kgs of potatoes cost
Yeah.
X,
And then
you make your own assessment.
No, it doesn't influence the price discovery elements within the fresh produce markets. No.
Right, so that's
Yeah,
independent.
it's separate channel,
All right.
and also it's changed form to a large extent. You know, a lot of product on market would be bulk, etc. But
Right.
if producers normally do supply retail as part of they would have the same type of packaging in their own brand on the floors to be able to have a reference price from which they can negotiate with chain stores in terms of their listing. But it does not have an influence on the price discovery element of the wholesale markets or the price discovery markets.
No, thank you very much for that. So I just want to, because I think you did cover this in your presentation, and it's repeated, I think, in your submission as well. I just wanted to make sure that we understand the points you are making very well. Those are, is it question 42? I think we have 457 on our bundle mark there. Because this is where we ask, what are the issues that you think the inquiry should consider? And I think the first one relates to failures in municipal market management and or local municipalities to reinvest in maintenance and in the essential infrastructure, and that make contributing to difficulties by emerging agribusinesses in developing and expanding their operations. Can you expand on this and how, what, because I think you are putting it back to the inquiry to investigate this further, but I just want to check if you can expand on it and perhaps maybe have some ideas of what can be done in the context of this inquiry.
Challenges.
Yeah, and in the context of within at least the remit of the powers of this inquiry.
I think if we look at the ecosystem and where currently municipal fresh produce markets are seated, it's within the ambit of local government, and it's at zero cost to the state. It generates its income from producers. And the responsibility of that lies to utilize that income to enhance and enable the ecosystem. If that is not done in alignment with a strategy, it would lose its effect and it will lose its efficiency. And I think for me, what we should do is to create that as centers of excellence, in my opinion, because if it does not happen, you will find that the gap that is being left by that inefficiencies will be taken up in whichever form by private enterprise. It's natural. It will happen that way. So I do think that is a process, and I also again think that's a role where government and industry can collaborate to see what do we need to do next. Because I do think the questions sometimes are not asked enough. Are our markets positioned still in the right spaces within the city? Because there were reasons why markets moved from inner town, from Mary Fitzgerald Square to Newtown, and from Newtown to City Deep. It's because of the city and the concentration of and where markets should be seated. This is 40 or 50 years later. Is it still in an ideal position where transport could be optimized, where there could be larger efficiencies driven either by rail or whatever the case might be? Those questions are not being asked by the owners of those facilities that are responsible for the enablement of the ecosystem. It's not being asked. So inevitably, if that becomes uncompetitive, it will create its own opportunity, whereby I believe private enterprise will take up the slack. It's inevitable. So that's one part of what we're seeing. I do think there's low hanging fruit in terms of improving the facilities within fresh produce markets. But again, it's a question of management. You have the markets appearing next week. They can answer for themselves. From the perspective where we sit, you cannot build any strategy, you cannot build any continuity when you have 25 CEOs of a market in less than 18 years. There's no consistency and there's no continuity. And you can see it in the level of degradation within the facilities. But it's still competitive, and that's the amazing part of it. But it will reach a point of saturation where it's not possible.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. And I think the last one is what you have is it in paragraph 136 of your letter. Just those input cost challenges that you see producers facing. Yes. I think you have listed this, but I think maybe if you can, because I just want to get a sense of what you have observed, yeah, and the kind of cost impact, right? So the kinds of, just if you are able to give us some information, because you track prices over time and what the farmers keep asking for,
Yeah.
you know, with all these
I-
increasing costs. Yeah.
I think it's one of the unrecognized elements of an open market system that it takes note of the elements of road infrastructure that's degrading, the cost of transport with prices and diesel and all of those elements rising that adds to the cost of getting product to market. When you're in the export channel and you sit with product at harbors that can't be exported because of inefficiencies, every day product sits at harbor, it adds cost. And ultimately that's cost to the grower. And ultimately the free market will have to then cost it in, and it will find its way within the ultimate price of food on the table of consumers. It's inevitable. And what will happen together with that, specifically when you look at electricity shortages, etc., where simply you cannot grow enough product to be able to water them in time, to be able to fertilize in time, it will have an effect of less product that will be produced, and you have the compounded effect of a very cold winter or a very wet summer and lots of rain that will influence the volume of product being produced. And normally producers take into account weather and would plant extra to say, we're going to have a cold snap, I might not be able to have the yields that I want, so I'll plant a little bit extra. In terms of these constraints, it will be a serious element for producers to take into account. I just cannot afford it. I just cannot do it. So if we get weather conditions that are not favorable, you'll have a shrinkage of total volume available for the market. And I don't think our demand for fresh produce is diminishing. We have the whole of Southern Africa's consumers that potentially are looking for produce. And yes, they produce quantities of product, but it's not. I don't think it's enough. I think we have a really good opportunity in expanding our fresh produce ecosystem if we can access those markets and those countries. And I do think it is an advantage for everybody involved.
So just maybe have you been able to, have you been able to, I suppose, because some of these constraints have been there for some time now, maybe 5 years up to now, I think, heightening, as it were. Have you been able to estimate the cost impact of this from your perspective? Even if it's in aggregate, it's okay.
That'll be very difficult, but if you only look at the inflation price index on food, I think it's reflected in that, and it's well documented. But to be able to have a definitive figure, I don't think that's possible from a measurement perspective. It's reflected in the aggregation of the increase in food in the food price index, in the inflation index.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Mr. Oosthuizen. I just want to check if you have anything you would like to add as your parting shot.
No, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the openness and the robust questions. I think it's necessary, and I also believe it's going to inform and the element of our national fresh produce markets and the system and the ecosystem of the agency model will stand in good stead.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Oosthuizen, and Mr. Mark Garden. You are excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Before you close, we just need to announce when and where. And so we resume, I have to read this carefully, on Tuesday, the 24th of October, 2023, at 10. So that day we'll have Simba, Spar, and Woolworths. Thank you.